Stories Between Us anthology, where Black queer men's lives, love, and tension take center stage. By the time Daniel Bell turned 35, he had learned how to disappear in plain sight. He wore tailored suits in neutral colors and kept his hair cropped close, the kind of grooming that signaled discipline without vanity. He spoke calmly, never raising his voice, and answered questions with just enough warmth to seem open while giving nothing away. At the firm, people described him as dependable. Clients trusted him, partners relied on him. No one knew anything about him that he had not decided was safe to be known. That had been the pattern since he was 17 and his mother's apartment went dark for good. Eviction notice taped crooked to the door while she slept off another night she wouldn't remember. Daniel had packed a single duffel bag, left a note he knew she would never read, and taken the late bus across town to a cousin who barely wanted him. From that point on, he learned the rules quickly. Don't need anyone. Don't want too much. Don't let desire show. Men came and went in his life like borrowed coats, warm for a moment, returned without fuss. He told himself that was adulthood. He told himself that was control. At the firm, Daniel handled reputation management for high-profile clients, the kind of work that required discretion and loyalty. When a senator's aide was caught in a hotel room he shouldn't have been in, Daniel made the calls. When a tech founder's private messages leaked, Daniel negotiated silence. He understood how secrets worked. He understood how power protected itself. What he didn't understand was why, after all these years, one memory still refused to loosen its grip. It came back to him in flashes. The smell of sandalwood mixed with something warmer. The weight of another man's body pressing him into a mattress that wasn't his. Fingers digging into his back like they needed proof. A voice low and unguarded, saying his name like it mattered. He hadn't even known the man's last name. That night had happened 12 years ago, in a city Daniel had sworn he would never return to. A conference, an open bar, too much bourbon, too much loneliness. One reckless choice that felt like relief and disaster at the same time. He had woken alone the next morning, sheets rumpled, heart pounding, and told himself it was nothing. Just sex, just a night. The kind of thing adults survived. Except he never forgot the man's face, or the way he had looked at Daniel afterward, quiet and searching, like he wanted to say something and didn't trust himself to do it. Daniel hadn't stayed to find out. Aaron Cross had learned a different kind of discipline. He grew up in a family that believed love was something you earned by being useful. His father was a pastor who preached restraint while practicing cruelty behind closed doors. His mother prayed harder the louder the house got. Aaron learned early how to read a room, how to make himself agreeable, how to swallow what he wanted before it could cause trouble. He left home at 18 and never looked back, except in dreams that woke him sweating. He worked his way through school, took whatever jobs paid, and eventually found his way into nonprofit development. It wasn't glamorous, but it made sense to him, helping organizations survive, translating need into numbers people with money could understand. He told himself it was enough. What he didn't tell himself was how lonely it felt to be known only for what he could provide. Men liked Aaron. They admired his kindness, his patience, the way he listened. They didn't stay. He was the kind of man people leaned on, not the kind they leaned into. Except once, That night had burned itself into his memory so clearly that sometimes he wondered if he had imagined it. A hotel bar thick with noise. A stranger at his side who met his eyes without flinching. A conversation that skipped pleasantries and went straight to the truth of being tired and wanting something real, even if it only lasted an hour. Daniel had felt different from the start. Guarded but attentive. Controlled in a way that made Aaron curious instead of cautious. When they touched, it wasn't frantic. It was deliberate. Like they were both afraid of breaking something. Aaron had woken to an empty bed and a familiar ache. He had sat there longer than he should have, staring at the door, knowing exactly what it meant. He told himself not to be dramatic. He told himself people left all the time. Still, he kept the memory close. He needed proof that he hadn't imagined being chosen. They did not meet again for 12 years. When they did, it wasn't at a bar or a hotel. It was at a charity gala held in a converted warehouse downtown. The kind of event that made money feel virtuous for a night. Aaron was there, representing a housing nonprofit, moving through the room with practiced ease, smiling when necessary, listening when required. Daniel arrived late, as always, scanning the space the way he did everything else. He was there on behalf of a client whose name carried weight, whose donation guaranteed a seat near the front. Daniel didn't like these events, but they were useful. Faces mattered. Appearances mattered. He saw Aaron across the room and stopped walking. Time did something strange then. The noise faded into a dull hum. Daniel felt the same jolt he had felt 12 years ago. Sharp and immediate, like recognition landing in his chest before his mind could catch up. Aaron looked older, broader through the shoulders, more settled in himself, still unmistakable. Aaron felt it too. He turned, mid-conversation, and froze. His smile faltered for just a second before returning, reflexive and polite. He excused himself and crossed the room slowly, as if approaching something unpredictable. They stood in front of each other, close enough to feel the pull, but far enough to pretend they didn't. Daniel spoke first. He always did when he felt cornered. He said Aaron's name, testing it, and felt a quiet satisfaction when Aaron didn't correct him. Aaron's voice was steady when he answered. He said Daniel's name like it had never left his mouth. They talked about nothing. The weather, the event. Mutual acquaintances they didn't have. Every word felt like a negotiation. Every pause felt loaded. When Aaron finally suggested they step outside, Daniel followed without asking why. The alley was narrow and dim, lit by a single flickering bulb. The sounds of the city pressed in on them. For a moment, neither spoke. Aaron broke the silence. He asked Daniel why he had left that morning without a word. Daniel felt the old instinct rise, the one that told him to deflect, to minimize. He surprised himself by answering honestly. He said he didn't trust himself to stay. He said he had been afraid that if he did, he would want something he couldn't manage. Aaron nodded slowly. He said that made sense. He said it didn't make it hurt less. The honesty between them felt dangerous. Daniel stepped closer without thinking. Aaron didn't move away. When they touched, it was electric in its restraint. A hand on an arm, fingers brushing a wrist. The memory of everything they hadn't said pressed in on them. Aaron asked if Daniel was seeing anyone. Daniel said no. Aaron admitted he had stopped trying to build something serious years ago. They laughed softly at that. The sound brittle and shared. Daniel suggested they leave together. Aaron hesitated only a moment before agreeing. They didn't go to a hotel. Aaron's apartment was small and warm, cluttered with books and plants that leaned toward the window like they trusted him. Daniel noticed everything: the careful order, the signs of a life built deliberately. When they kissed, it was slow, almost reverent. Years of restraint came undone in layers, not all at once. Daniel felt himself unraveling in a way he hadn't allowed in years. Aaron met him there, steady and present, not asking for promises, just truth. The sex was intense, but quiet. No performance, no hurry. Just two men rediscovering something that had never quite let them go. Afterward, they lay tangled together, breath evening out, the weight of reality settling back in. Daniel spoke into the dark. He said he wasn't good at staying. He said his life was built on control and distance. He said he didn't know how to let someone matter without feeling like he was losing ground. Aaron listened. He always had. He said he didn't need Daniel to change overnight. He said he needed honesty more than effort. He said he was tired of being the man people came to when they needed comfort, but never chose when they wanted a future. Daniel closed his eyes. The words landed hard. They didn't sleep much that night. What followed wasn't a rush into love. It was something slower and more complicated. They met in pockets of time Daniel could spare. Dinners that ran long. Mornings that ended too soon. Aaron learned the contours of Daniel's guardedness. Daniel learned how deeply Aaron felt everything, how carefully he hid it. The imbalance was always there. Daniel's job, his clients, the unspoken understanding that Aaron's life would bend more often than Daniel's would. It showed up in small ways: missed calls, rescheduled plans. Aaron pretending it didn't matter, until it did. The breaking point came on a Sunday Daniel had promised would be theirs. He canceled an hour before, voice tight with apology. A crisis, a client, he would explain later. Aaron didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He simply said he couldn't keep making room for someone who only showed up when it was convenient. Daniel heard the finality beneath the calm and panicked. He went to Aaron's apartment anyway, unannounced, the way he never did anything. They argued then, not loudly, but honestly. Aaron said he didn't want to be another secret Daniel managed. Daniel said he was terrified of needing anyone the way he had needed his mother. Aaron said love wasn't the same as neglect. Daniel said fear didn't care about logic. The silence afterward felt heavier than the fight. Aaron asked Daniel to choose. Not forever. Just now. Daniel stood there, heart racing, every instinct screaming at him to retreat. He thought about the life he had built, the safety of distance, the way desire had always been something he contained. He thought about waking up alone in a hotel 12 years ago and telling himself it meant nothing. He stepped forward. Daniel didn't quit his job. He didn't become someone else overnight. But he did start making different decisions. He told clients no when he could. He left events early. He let Aaron see the parts of his life he had always kept sealed off. The mess, the history, the fear. Aaron didn't make it easy. He asked questions. He pushed back. He refused to disappear into Daniel's schedule. Their intimacy changed with it. Less urgency, more depth, sex that felt like communication instead of escape. Still, The future hovered, unresolved. One night, months later, they lay in Aaron's bed, window cracked open to the city. Daniel traced the lines of Aaron's face with quiet familiarity. Aaron asked him if he could imagine a life where he didn't run at the first sign of need. Daniel took a long breath. He didn't promise. He didn't lie. He said he was trying. Aaron nodded, accepting that for what it was. They fell asleep like that, bodies close, the city humming around them. It wasn't an ending. It wasn't even a resolution. But for the first time, Daniel didn't leave in the morning. And Aaron, listening to his steady breathing beside him, let himself believe that staying might finally be possible. Daniel woke before the city did. He lay still, staring at the ceiling of Aaron's bedroom, listening to the distant sound of traffic building like a tide he could already feel pulling him back. Aaron slept beside him, turned slightly away, one arm tucked beneath the pillow, breath slow and even. There was something disarming about seeing him like this, unguarded and unperformed. A version of Aaron that existed only when no one was watching. Daniel stayed longer than he usually did. He told himself it was because he didn't want to wake him. He knew better. When Aaron finally stirred, blinking against the pale light creeping through the blinds, he smiled without hesitation. It wasn't hopeful or desperate. It was simply open. Daniel felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the instinct to brace himself against something that felt too easy. They moved through the morning carefully. Coffee brewed. A shower ran. Aaron leaned against the counter while Daniel scrolled through emails, already half pulled back into a world that demanded things from him. Aaron noticed. He always did. He didn't comment. Before Daniel left, Aaron touched his arm and asked quietly if he would see him later that week. Daniel said yes without thinking. The word came easily. The follow-through felt heavier. At the firm, the day swallowed him whole. Meetings stacked on the meetings. A client called in a panic. Another needed reassurance that a rumor would stay contained. Daniel slipped back into the role he had perfected. Calm voice, steady hands, solutions without judgment. It was familiar. It was safe. What unsettled him was how often his thoughts drifted back to Aaron. Not the sex, not even the intimacy. The simple fact of being witnessed without performance. That evening, Daniel texted Aaron an invitation. A donor reception connected to a housing initiative. Not exactly work, not exactly personal. Low stakes, he told himself. A test run. Aaron hesitated before agreeing. Daniel felt it through the screen. Still, Aaron said yes. The reception took place in a renovated gallery downtown, all exposed brick and curated minimalism. The room buzzed with polite conversation and the low hum of money moving itself around. Daniel arrived first, scanning the space instinctively, noting exits, faces, potential problems. When Aaron arrived, Daniel felt it immediately. Not a rush of desire, but a shift. Aaron wore a dark jacket that fit him well, simple and deliberate. He looked comfortable, but alert, as if he knew he was stepping into unfamiliar territory. Daniel introduced him as a friend. The word landed between them, thin and unsatisfying. Aaron nodded, accepting it without comment. As they moved through the room, Aaron watched Daniel work. The easy charm, the way people leaned in when he spoke, the subtle distance he maintained even in warmth. It was impressive. It was also instructive. Daniel touched Aaron less than usual. A hand at his back once, a brief brush of fingers, enough to signal connection, not enough to draw attention. Someone noticed anyway. It was subtle. A lingering glance from a colleague Daniel trusted, a pause that lasted half a beat too long. Daniel felt it and adjusted instinctively, stepping slightly away, angling his body. Aaron saw the movement and understood it immediately. The realization stung more than he expected. Later, over drinks, Aaron excused himself to the restroom. When he returned, Daniel was deep in conversation with a donor, his attention fully engaged elsewhere. Aaron stood to the side, invisible by design. He waited. He watched. He learned. They left together, polite and contained. Outside, the night air felt heavier. Daniel apologized without prompting. He said he hadn't meant to make Aaron feel sidelined. Aaron said it was fine. His voice was even. Too even. At Aaron's apartment, the tension shifted. They kissed, slower than usual. The sex that followed was intimate but restrained, as if both were aware of the unspoken question hanging between them. When it was over, they lay facing each other, breath sinking, silence thick. Aaron spoke first. He asked Daniel if this was what it would always be like in public. Daniel hesitated. He said he didn't want to put Aaron in a difficult position. He said he needed time. Aaron nodded, absorbing the answer without reacting. He rolled onto his side and went to sleep not long after. Daniel stayed awake. The next morning, Daniel left early. This time, he didn't linger. The client crisis broke 2 days later. A prominent tech executive, married, discreetly gay, had been photographed entering a private residence with a man who was not his spouse. The images were grainy, but suggestive. The potential fallout was significant. Investors, public image, family. Daniel was assigned immediately. He handled the situation with precision. Calls were made. Stories were adjusted. Silence was purchased. The narrative was reshaped until it barely resembled the truth. The executive thanked him profusely, voice thick with relief. As Daniel hung up, something twisted in his gut. Later that evening, Aaron saw the story online. Or rather, what passed for it, a brief mention, no names, no confirmation. He recognized the shape of it anyway. He recognized the careful erasure. When Daniel came over that night, Aaron asked him about his day. Daniel answered automatically, vague and practiced. Aaron asked one more question. He asked if Daniel ever worried about what all that managing did to him. Daniel deflected. He always did. Aaron didn't press. Instead, he asked something else. He asked if, in a situation like that, Daniel would protect him or manage him. The question landed cleanly. Daniel felt exposed in a way he hadn't anticipated. He said he would never hurt Aaron. He said he cared. Aaron nodded slowly. He said that wasn't what he asked. They didn't argue. They moved closer, drawn by habit and need. Sex followed, but it felt different. Daniel held Aaron tightly, as if proximity could substitute for reassurance. Aaron let him even as something in him shifted. Afterward, Aaron lay awake while Daniel slept. He watched the steady rise and fall of his chest and felt a familiar ache settle in. He had been here before. Not with Daniel, but with the pattern. He decided then that he would stop making himself smaller. The offer came the following week: a promotion, greater visibility, more influence, the kind of opportunity Daniel had worked toward his entire career. The unspoken expectation was clear: maintain discretion, avoid complications. Daniel thanked them and asked for time to consider. That night, he didn't tell Aaron. They lay together in the dark, bodies close. Aaron sensed the shift immediately. He asked if something was wrong. Daniel said he was just tired. Aaron turned toward him, resting his head against Daniel's shoulder. Daniel wrapped an arm around him, holding on more tightly than before. The phone lay face down on the nightstand, unread messages waiting. Daniel stared into the dark, aware that the choice ahead of him would demand more than intention. It would demand cost. Aaron closed his eyes, letting himself enjoy the closeness for what it was, even as he prepared for the possibility that staying might no longer be enough. The city moved on around them, indifferent and loud. Neither man slept well. Daniel didn't tell Aaron about the promotion right away. Not because he was hiding it. Not because he didn't want to share good news. He simply came home carrying it the way he carried everything else now. Compressed, contained, already exhausting before it was spoken aloud. Aaron noticed the shift immediately. Daniel arrived later than usual that first night, jacket still on, phone face down, but close enough to reach without looking. He kissed Aaron softly, a quick press of lips that felt more habitual than hungry. When Aaron asked how his day had been, Daniel answered in summary: busy, long, productive. Aaron listened. He always did. But something about Daniel's voice felt distant, like it was already aimed toward tomorrow. They ate dinner without ceremony. The conversation moved easily enough, but it skimmed the surface. Aaron asked about work. Daniel answered without detail. Aaron talked about a meeting at the nonprofit, a small win, a delayed decision. Daniel nodded, distracted but present enough to pass. When they went to bed, Daniel turned off the light and pulled Aaron close, holding him tighter than usual. Aaron accepted the closeness, resting his head against Daniel's chest, listening to his breathing slow. It should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt like Daniel was already gone. Over the next few days, the pattern repeated. Daniel was still there, physically, reliably, but something essential had withdrawn. He checked his phone more often. His responses came a beat too late. When Aaron spoke, Daniel listened like a man filing information away rather than receiving it. Their intimacy shifted, not disappeared, but changed. Daniel touched Aaron with familiarity instead of urgency. Kisses lingered less. Sex happened, but it felt quieter, like something they were both careful not to ask too much from. Aaron found himself watching Daniel afterward, searching his face for something he couldn't name. Aaron didn't accuse. He didn't demand reassurance. He had learned long ago that chasing closeness only made it retreat faster. Instead, he waited. The night Daniel finally mentioned the promotion, it came out casually, almost as an afterthought. They were standing in the kitchen, Aaron rinsing dishes, Daniel leaning against the counter. He said it like a fact, not a triumph. Aaron turned, surprised despite himself. He congratulated Daniel sincerely. He asked what it meant. Daniel shrugged. More responsibility, less flexibility. He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Aaron nodded slowly. He said that sounded heavy. Daniel agreed. He said it would take some adjusting. They stood there a moment longer, the air between them thick with things neither was naming. That night, Aaron lay awake beside Daniel, staring into the dark. Daniel slept fitfully, shifting often, brow creased even in rest. Aaron felt a familiar ache settle in his chest. Not jealousy, not fear exactly, but something quieter and more dangerous. Neglect disguised as necessity. A week passed. Daniel missed a dinner they had planned, calling late with an apology that sounded practiced. Aaron told him it was fine. The next time it happened, Aaron said nothing at all. Instead, he began to pull back in small ways. He stopped rearranging his schedule. He didn't wait up as long. He answered messages with less immediacy. Not out of spite, but self-preservation. Daniel noticed, but misread it as understanding. The night it finally surfaced, it wasn't dramatic. Daniel came over late, exhaustion etched into his face. Aaron let him in, took his jacket, asked if he'd eaten. Daniel shook his head. Aaron reheated leftovers without comment. They sat on the couch, close but not touching. Daniel talked about a case, a problem he was trying to solve. Aaron listened for a while, then interrupted gently. He asked Daniel where he went when he got tired now. Daniel blinked, caught off guard. He said he didn't understand. Aaron clarified. He asked who Daniel talked to when he needed to unload, where his attention went when the day ended. Daniel hesitated. He said he handled things. That was his job. Aaron nodded. He said he knew that. He asked whether Daniel still came home to him, or if Aaron had become another place Daniel stopped when he had time. The words landed softly. That was what made them hurt. Daniel sat back, running a hand over his face. He said Aaron was reading too much into things. He said this was just a busy period. Aaron didn't argue. He said, maybe. Then he said he felt like he was starting to compete with Daniel's exhaustion. And exhaustion always won. Daniel looked at him then. Really looked. He moved closer, reaching for Aaron's hand, but Aaron didn't immediately respond. The hesitation stretched, charged. The erotic tension between them sharpened in that space. Not desire rushing forward, desire held back, waiting to see if it would be met. Daniel said he didn't want Aaron to feel secondary. Aaron said feeling secondary wasn't the problem. Feeling optional was. That was the line. Daniel swallowed. He said he was trying to balance everything. Aaron said he believed him. He said balance was different from presence. They didn't fight. They sat with it. Later, in bed, Daniel wrapped himself around Aaron, seeking closeness. Aaron allowed it, but he stayed awake long after Daniel drifted off, staring at the ceiling, aware of the quiet distance growing between them. The cost arrived not as a single blow, but as erosion. Daniel didn't lose his job. He didn't face scandal. What he lost was ease. Aaron stopped bending first. He began staying late at work when he needed to. He made plans that didn't involve Daniel. He reclaimed parts of himself he had quietly set aside. Daniel felt the shift like a change in temperature. He noticed Aaron was less available, less eager to accommodate. It unsettled him in ways he hadn't anticipated. One night, Daniel came over unannounced, urgency sharp in his movements. Aaron let him in, surprised but steady. Daniel said he felt like he was losing him. Aaron didn't deny it. He said he was making room for himself again. Daniel stepped closer, stopping just short of touching. The desire between them hummed, restrained and unresolved. He said he didn't want success to cost him Aaron. Aaron looked up at him, eyes clear. He said success wasn't the problem. Absence was. They stood there, bodies close, the tension between them heavier than any physical release could have been. Daniel reached for Aaron's hand, this time deliberately. Aaron let him take it, but he didn't lean in. Not yet. Aaron said choosing each other would require more than staying. It would require showing up when it wasn't convenient. Daniel nodded. He didn't promise. He didn't deflect. He stayed. But this time, Aaron knew staying would only matter if Daniel learned how to arrive. Aaron didn't expect Lucas to feel easy. That was the problem. Lucas had entered Aaron's world quietly, the way men like him always did, through introductions that sounded incidental and arrived already smoothed over. A board member at the nonprofit had sent an email to Aaron, framing it as an opportunity to get some positive media attention from a known public figure, a chance to align the organization with someone willing to put real money behind real nonprofit work. Aaron recognized the name immediately. Lucas was the client Daniel's firm had protected months earlier, the one whose gay scandal story had been scrubbed so thoroughly it barely existed anymore. The scandal had flickered and vanished, replaced by a careful narrative of growth and discretion. Aaron remembered the night Daniel came home drained and distant from working on the case at work, saying only that some messes took more out of him than others. When Lucas showed up at the nonprofit's offices, he didn't arrive like a man seeking absolution. He arrived like someone who understood how these things worked, polished and attentive in a way that felt practiced. He spoke about listening, about wanting to support something meaningful, about learning from people who did the work instead of standing in front of cameras pretending to care. Aaron had been cautious at first. He always was, but Lucas made it easy to lower his guard. He asked Aaron questions and actually waited for the answers. He didn't interrupt. He didn't redirect the conversation back to himself. He let Aaron talk about the organization, about the strain of keeping it afloat, about the slow erosion that came from constantly translating human need into something fundable. They worked well together more than Aaron expected. Planning meetings turned into longer conversations. Strategy sessions bled into discussions about intention, about the difference between repairing an image and rebuilding a life. Lucas never mentioned Daniel. Aaron didn't either. The omission felt deliberate on both sides, like an unspoken agreement to keep certain lines uncrossed. Over time, Aaron noticed the way Lucas watched him. Not hungrily, not obviously, with interest sharpened by attention. Lucas treated Aaron like someone whose opinion mattered, not just someone executing a plan. It was subtle, but effective. Aaron told himself it was all professional. He told himself it felt good because it was supposed to. The nonprofit needed this partnership. Hell, they needed the money. The work mattered. Lucas's presence meant stability, at least for now. What Aaron didn't account for was how thin he already was. Daniel's absence had settled into Aaron's life gradually, the way quiet does when you stop noticing it arrive. Aaron carried that weight into meetings without realizing it, into conversations where he spoke a little more honestly than he intended, because someone was finally listening without distraction. Lucas noticed the openings immediately. He framed his questions carefully, never prying, always inviting. How long had Aaron been doing this work? What did he want it to look like if he didn't have to compromise so much? What did it cost him, carrying everyone else's expectations? Aaron answered because the questions landed where he already hurt. He talked about exhaustion, about loving something that never loved you back the same way. He talked about distance without naming Daniel, about the strange loneliness of being with someone who was always somewhere else, even when they were standing right in front of you. Lucas didn't offer solutions. He didn't tell Aaron to demand more or walk away. He listened like presence was enough. That was the danger. Aaron didn't see it until it had already happened, until professional concern softened into something more intimate, something that leaned in instead of holding space. Lucas's attention didn't feel like pressure. It felt like relief, like rest. And Aaron, already depleted, didn't realize how much he had been waiting for someone to make things feel simple again. Not because they were, but because simplicity was easier than asking the man he loved to finally come all the way back. They had been working late, the office mostly empty, the city dim beyond the windows. The nonprofit had been stretched thin lately, donors cautious, expectations high. Lucas had stayed behind to review messaging, posture relaxed, jacket slung over the back of a chair. Aaron talked because Lucas asked the right questions. Not about budgets, not about optics, about how it felt to carry things quietly for too long, about how loneliness could exist even inside something stable. Aaron didn't name Daniel, but the shape of him hovered in every sentence. Lucas listened without interrupting, eyes steady, attention unbroken. When Aaron finally mentioned Daniel, it came out softer than he intended. Not accusation, not complaint, just truth. That the man he loved had started coming home already elsewhere. That absence could exist without abandonment. Lucas nodded as if he understood, as if he had always understood. He moved closer at some point. Aaron didn't notice immediately. When he did, it was already too late to pretend the moment was purely professional. Lucas's voice dropped. His hand brushed Aaron's arm. Not accidental, not rushed. Aaron froze, not in fear, but confusion. This wasn't what he had been offering. This wasn't what he thought he was saying. Lucas crossed the line gently. That was the worst part. Aaron hesitated. He should have stepped back. He should have named it. Instead, he stayed still. The room suddenly smaller, his vulnerability exposed in a way that felt both intimate and wrong. Lucas kissed him like this had always been inevitable, like Aaron's openness was permission rather than trust. Aaron didn't stop it. Not because he wanted Lucas, not in the way desire usually announces itself, sharp and demanding. He didn't stop it because his body recognized the shape of being held again, because Lucas's arms closed around him with a certainty Aaron hadn't felt in months. It felt familiar before it felt wrong. Lucas pulled him closer, slow and deliberate, as if giving Aaron time to change his mind. Aaron didn't. He rested his forehead against Lucas's shoulder, breathing him in, letting the weight of another body take over the work of standing upright. His hands curled into the fabric of Lucas's jacket, gripping the way he used to grip Daniel in the quiet moments when words failed him. Wrapped in Lucas's arms, Aaron felt the ache of what he had been missing more clearly than ever. The steadiness, the sense of being gathered instead of managed. Lucas held him like there was nowhere else he needed to be. Like Aaron wasn't something to juggle or fit in later. Aaron let himself sink into that illusion. He closed his eyes and allowed the closeness to carry him, allowed Lucas's warmth to substitute for the man who no longer came all the way back to him. For a moment, just a moment, Aaron let himself pretend this was what it felt like to be chosen again. That was how Lucas overtook him. Not through urgency, through presence. And when it was over, when the room settled back into stillness, Aaron knew he had crossed a line he hadn't meant to approach. Not out of want, but out of longing for something he had been asking for all along. Lucas gathered himself quickly. He spoke about schedules, about next steps, already compartmentalizing. Aaron watched him move through the space with practiced ease, the weight of what had happened settling unevenly in his chest. When Lucas left, Aaron stayed where he was, staring at the darkened window, trying to understand how something that felt so small had already changed everything. Daniel found out 2 days later. It wasn't dramatic. No confession, no warning. Just a name, tossed out lightly in the break room by a coworker who thought it was funny. Someone joked about Lucas doing his redemption tour, about how he'd landed with a nonprofit to soften the edges after everything they'd buried. The coworker mentioned the organization by name, casual and unguarded, assuming Daniel would recognize it as just another strategic move. Daniel did recognize it. It was Aaron's organization. The room didn't spin. Nothing shattered. Daniel smiled automatically, let the moment pass, but something inside him went cold and still. The overlap was too precise to be coincidence. By the time Daniel left the office, the realization had settled fully in his chest. When he went to Aaron that night, he didn't ask what had happened. He asked why Aaron had never mentioned Lucas. Daniel didn't raise his voice. That was the first thing Aaron noticed. He stood just inside the door, jacket still on, keys loose in his hand like he hadn't decided whether he was staying or leaving. His face was unreadable in the way it got when he was holding something down too hard. Aaron closed the door behind him and waited. Daniel spoke carefully, as if every word needed permission before it could exist. He said Lucas's name once, letting it sit between them. Then he said the name of the nonprofit. Aaron's nonprofit. He didn't accuse, he didn't explain how he knew. He asked why Aaron had never mentioned it. The question was clean. Too clean. It cut straight through everything Aaron had rehearsed in his head. Aaron didn't answer right away. He walked past Daniel into the living room, giving himself distance, time. He rested his hands on the back of the couch and stared at the wall like it might offer him an exit that didn't exist. He said he hadn't thought it mattered. Daniel exhaled slowly, a sound closer to grief than anger. He asked how long he had been working with Lucas. Aaron answered honestly. He said long enough. That was when Daniel finally stepped fully into the room. He took off his jacket and set it down with care, like grounding himself. He said Lucas had been his client, that his firm had cleaned up everything Lucas didn't want attached to his name, that Lucas had never mentioned Aaron either. Aaron turned then. He looked at Daniel fully, eyes sharp with something defensive and wounded all at once. He said Lucas hadn't talked about Daniel. Not really. Daniel nodded, absorbing that. He asked Aaron if Lucas knew who Daniel was to him. Aaron hesitated. That pause said more than any confession could have. Daniel swallowed. He asked again, softer this time. Aaron said yes. The room went quiet in a way that felt deliberate, like even the air had decided to stop moving. Daniel asked when, and Aaron told him. Daniel didn't sit down. He didn't pace. He stood there, shoulders squared, holding himself together by force of habit. He said he kept wondering why Aaron hadn't told him. He said he replayed every conversation, every quiet night, trying to figure out where the truth had gone. Aaron finally spoke without buffering it. He said he hadn't known how. He said Daniel had already been so far away. He said it hadn't felt like something Daniel wanted to hear. Daniel looked at him then, really looked. His voice broke just slightly when he asked why Aaron hadn't come to him first. Aaron's jaw tightened. He said he had. In moments, Daniel hadn't been present enough to notice. He said he'd stopped asking because it started to feel like pleading. Daniel nodded again, but his eyes were wet now. He said Lucas had come to him for help after the scandal. That he had watched Lucas lie convincingly, watched him turn vulnerability into leverage. He said he knew exactly who Lucas was. Aaron flinched at that, guilt flashing across his face before he could hide it. He said he hadn't planned for anything to happen. He said he'd been tired and lonely, open in a way he hadn't meant to be. Daniel asked him what happened. Aaron didn't give details. He didn't need to. He said it crossed a line. He said he wished it hadn't. He said he didn't know how to hold the weight of it now. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, something in him had changed. Not anger, not fury. Something quieter and more permanent. He said it wasn't the sex. Aaron looked up sharply. Daniel said it was the fact that Aaron had given Lucas something Daniel had been guarding. Something Aaron had been asking him for. He said he couldn't stop thinking about the way Lucas got the honesty, the closeness, the softness Daniel had kept postponing. Aaron's voice cracked when he said he hadn't gone looking for Lucas. He said Lucas had been there. Daniel nodded slowly. He said that was exactly the problem. They stood there, facing each other, the truth fully visible now. Nowhere left to redirect it. No one reached out. No one stepped closer. Daniel finally said he didn't know what this meant for them. Aaron answered just as quietly. He said he didn't either. Daniel picked up his jacket. He paused at the door, hand on the handle, and looked back once more. He said he wished Aaron had trusted him enough to tell him. Aaron said he wished Daniel had come home sooner. Neither of them argued with that. Daniel left, and Aaron stayed where he was long after the door closed, the silence settling in around him like something earned and irreversible. Aaron knew he would not disappear again for anyone. Daniel knew some losses did not announce themselves until it was too late. Thank you for listening to Stories Between Us Anthology. You can find every episode on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Rate the show and leave a comment. It helps more people find us.